Hello everyone. Welcome to the part 2 of the Getting Started with YTT tutorial series. In the first part, we saw introduction to YTT, what kind of problems YTT helps to solve, how templating with YTT helps reduce boilerplate, and we saw YTT in action with few examples on Playground and how to run YTT on CLI. We saw how to extract variables, use functions to extract common code using conditionals and for loops. Now in this tutorial, let's look into a slightly more involved scenario where YTT can help us avoid kind of a problem. Have you ever made the same edits in multiple places in your Kubernetes configuration manually? As you might be aware, this can be error prone and can lead to misconfigurations. Here, YTT can help us avoid this kind of problem. Let's see from an example. So here is a manifest file ready to deploy to our Kubernetes cluster. It has two objects, deployment and service. As you might know, the deployment contains a section that is a template for all the pods that are going to be created. Here we see there are 3 pods, and each of these pods are going to have this set of labels. The deployment also has a selector, and it is used for relocating any pods that it should manage. Once the pods are up and running, the corresponding service is used to direct traffic to those pods. It does so with a set of selectors that matches the labels or the subset of labels on those pods. So in short, the labels in the selector of the service must match some subset of labels on the pods that were generated ultimately from the deployment. So this is important to keep these labels in sync. Let's see how this deployment works. So for that, let me deploy this to a Kubernetes cluster. So my deployment is succeeded here. Let me open the browser. And let's see. We get a response from server. Now, let me go ahead and make some changes in my deployment configuration. So let's say if I want to make some change in instance name here. In service, I made the change to XYZ, but now I forgot to make same changes in the deployment, for example. Let's see what happens when I deploy this. So after the deployment, I can see the deployment is succeeded. I can see the status, and when I get endpoints, I can see that there are no endpoints generated. And let's look at the browser window, refresh, and the site cannot be reached. So obviously the deployment is successful, but the service doesn't know which pods it should route the traffic to. There would be no IP addresses to route to. So that's why when we look at the application, we get nothing. Now let's make the change in our deployment configuration to match all the labels. Once these are matched, and I'll redeploy. So now after matching the labels, I redeployed, and now let's look at the browser and I can get the response back. So let's get back to the deployment configuration. Notice that I had to remember to make the changes in all 3 places. And so the problem is that there must be some way that guarantees that all these changes stay in sync. And we can do this in YTT by extracting the YAML fragment into a function. So YTT provides a way to extract the entire chunk of YAML and return it from a function. This function is called YAML fragment function. And this will eliminate the risk of mislabeling certain keys and values at multiple places. So how do we write the YAML fragment function? So we start with #at, define labels, and end. And we just copy these labels, paste it over here, and then call them from all the places where we add these labels. So this is how we write the YAML fragment functions. These are YAML structures that are wrapped in starlock function definition. And these are different than starlock functions that we saw in first part. Notice that there is no return statement over here, and everything inside the function will be the return value. These are used when you need to return a nested YAML structure or key value pairs. Now let's see the output from YTT and then redeploy. The labels are getting inserted at all the places where we called the labels from. Let me redeploy the application. So I redeployed the application and let's see on the browser, we get the response back. So let's make one more change in the deployment YAML configuration. Now, if I want to add some more labels to this, let's say I will add version to this. Notice that I just have to update label at one place, and we can see that the labels are updated at all places. So this is how our configurations can be in sync with YAML fragment functions. So try using these functions and let us know if you have any questions. Please reach out to us through our Kubernetes Slack channel. Thank you and see you in the next one.